Good evening, everybody, and we'll get started in just a few more seconds as people are joining in. Okay, we will get started. Good evening, everybody. My name is Lynette Owens, and I am the founder and global director of Trend Micro's Internet Safety for Kids and Families program. I'd like to welcome everybody from coast to coast for joining us this evening. In fact, here you are, and I'd like to encourage you in the chat to tell us where you're from. If you feel free to tell us where you're from. I also want to go over a few housekeeping items, and that is if you are able to and you're watching on a laptop or an iPad and you're able to participate, please do use the chat. Let everybody know where you're from. Please say hello if you're listening in Spanish or Somali with us tonight as well. The other thing is if you are attending and want to hear it in Spanish or Somali, please select the globe icon at the bottom of your screen and pick the language that you would like to listen in on tonight. I would like to welcome our interpreters for the evening. We have Ms. Muna Abdi and Mr. Abdi Elmi, who will be providing the Somali translation, and Ms. Gigi Margarita, who will be offering the Spanish translation. So again, if you're listening in those other languages, please say hello in the chat. Tell us where you're from and tell us if you're listening in another language so we know you are there. Okay, fantastic. Another thing is that at any time, please feel free to use the Q&A option to ask questions. And I will pause throughout the presentation to answer them. At the end, there'll be a short survey. We want to hear from you if this was helpful tonight. And if you do choose to include your email address with the survey, you will be eligible to win one of 5 prizes, which I'll talk about later on. So again, I'm going to go back to this slide. Welcome everybody from where you are. Put it in the chat. Tell us where you're from. And hello from coast to coast. Thank you for joining me tonight. So a couple of things I would like to ask to get to know you. So please answer this poll. How old is your oldest child? How old is your oldest child? Are they 5 years old or younger, 6 to 10 years old, 11 to 14, 15 or older? How old is your oldest child? This gives me a good sense of where you are in your phases of parenting and the role of technology in their lives. And while you do that for me, I want to just let you know a little bit about myself. I have been doing this work for Trend for 13 years, back when Facebook wasn't even available to everybody. And I have currently a 17 and a 14-year-old. So I've watched them grow up with the very technologies and challenges and issues that we're going to talk about tonight. So again, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A so we're able to flag it there, and use the chat just to say hello to each other. Okay. All right, so let's see. Oops. And the answer for most of you is 11 to 14, followed very, very closely by 6 to 10. So congratulations, you're in the wonder years, which have, it's the most interesting time, especially during this pandemic, to have children of these ages. I feel for you. It was definitely a difficult time for this age, those age groups in particular. The second question I have for you is, how are your children going to school right now? So are they remote? Are they in a hybrid situation, or are they completely in person? So let me know how your kids are going to school: remote, hybrid, or in person. And while you're answering this question, there is a study that has been ongoing since last August, which has been taking a look at how schools across the country have decided to handle school this past year. And it looks like right now a majority of you are saying in person. So that's great. In person. So you're very lucky. Very lucky. I'm sure that makes it easier for you. Next is hybrid. And after that is completely remote. So it turns out that the majority of the country is actually in a hybrid model. So as we know, there was all a period of time where our kids were remote when we shut down things at the end of last year. But hopefully better days are coming. Oops. Okay. And a lot has changed. You know, maybe some of these comments that you see on the screen were comments that you heard in your own house. And our houses became school for a little while. They became a place of work, the restaurant, the gym, the movie theater. A lot has changed. Even after the pandemic, I think a lot will remain changed. And that's largely going to be the way in which technology became part of our lives, the new ways in which we may have started using it that we didn't consider before. How many of you, you can put it in the chat, how many of you started doing virtual reunions with family and friends? You know, why did we wait to do it? Could we have been doing that with Zoom all along? How many of you signed up for Netflix or Disney Plus for the first time in the last year? Any WandaVision fans out there? Huge one here. Great. Again, these are things that, will you get rid of it? Probably not. Not that you're hooked now in some of these shows, but maybe that gave you a reason to gather as a family. So some of these changes might remain. What has not changed, though, over all this time is that our children still need our guidance, because the risks did not go away. The risks of seeing content that's not appropriate, making contact with people that maybe they shouldn't, or you don't feel comfortable with, or risks of more screen time and what that meant to them and to you as a family. What also didn't change, though, is the benefits that these technologies present to us. Again, the pandemic sort of accelerated people using the internet in ways maybe they should have been all along, or could have been all along, and you might stick with it. Finally, that teaching our kids to be great digital citizens has not changed, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I know that some of you, having done these sessions with parents for years now, there's always quite a wide range of knowledge, of comfort to ask questions. I want to again encourage everyone in any language to submit your questions through the Q&A. And if it's not in English, our interpreters will help us answer that. But I want to make sure tonight that as questions pop up for you, you feel free to ask them of me, and I will do my best to answer them. So what do we mean by digital citizenship? Well, very, very often we think of it as just the risks, as just safety issues. And those are important. We need to teach our children the risks and how to avoid them. But it also is a whole lot of other stuff, including things like digital literacy. You know, how do I actually use privacy settings? Where do I turn to for information that is credible for my paper, for my schoolwork, for my presentation? It includes things like the rules and the morals of how we behave um, towards others within an online community, and and also what the consequences of our behaviors and actions online might be. Finally, this is the piece that almost nobody talks about. Very often when we're telling children, here's how you should use technology, it's very, very often a list of things of what not to do. We have to remember that it must be balanced with how they should be using technology. What are ways that would benefit them, that are productive, that are good for others and the world around them? So we have to tell them as much what to do as much as we say what not to do. So the way that we like to think about a whole bunch of issues, and we are going to go through a lot of topics tonight. So that's why I encourage you to ask questions, and I will do my best to get through them quickly and still leave time for questions. But we like to organize this in 4 ways. First, be online. We know that this is no longer a choice. We know that helping our kids do that is already necessary for school, but also if it wasn't necessary for school, we know that it's important for their futures. But while they're there, how do we help them be safe, be kind, and be savvy? And what we mean by being online is how do we set up the right environment, rules, and example for them? When we talk about being safe, we talk about how to protect your privacy, your personal information, and even your physical self. When we talk about kindness, it's not just about how we are kind, how we behave towards others, but it also means how do you make sure you direct that kindness to yourself as well. And finally, being savvy, being smart about this use of technology. How do we teach good habits and encourage good uses? This is the list of what they should do, not the list of what they should not do. So a few of these I'm going to go through pretty quickly because we've been living in this environment, specifically the pandemic, for some time. But I just want to touch on a couple of things when it comes to use of screens, because even for those of you who have children already going to school in person, there's still a reliance on the internet within the schools when they're there, and then for homework at home, and then for fun time after that. So screen time is still a reality, regardless of how your children are going to school. And so in terms of the environment, if you are in a remote or hybrid situation, I think making sure everybody has a quiet space and headphones. But the thing about the eyes, very few of us practice this very well, but there can be really real damage to the eyes and our children's eyes too, with blue light coming off of the screen. So, using the 30-30-30 rule, which is every 30 minutes, look away for 30 feet, like outside the window, for 30 seconds. You could set an alarm, they could set an alarm to remind them of this, but this is really an important habit, especially these days, since screen time is so high for us all. I've had some families tell me that they have invested in they're fairly inexpensive. You can get them on Amazon. These are blue light glasses. You don't need a prescription for them. You can buy them in packs of 5 or 6 or 4 for your family. Everybody should be using them if you're on the computer quite a bit, because again, it's very real damage that can happen with blue light. Okay. And I think with posture and movement, these probably are pretty obvious, but I just want to make sure we put that there. Feet should be on something and flat if you're seated using. My kids like to really be hunched over their laptops, sometimes in bed or on the couch, and it's really not the best thing to be doing for a long period of time. On setting up the environment in your home, we're going to get a little bit technical for a minute. And, again, for some of you, this might be already obvious, but you obviously have a router if you've got internet access at home. But very often people don't ever change the password on it. So if you haven't done it in a while, I highly recommend you do it, and try to do it with some frequency. The other thing about the router is it's a good idea to think about all of the devices in your house connecting through that router, and using the main network for the most critical laptops or devices, like let's say it's your work laptop. But the non-critical devices like gaming or kids' iPad or their Kindle, put that on the guest network. By doing this, if for some reason one of their devices was compromised in any way, it would separate your more sensitive devices from any harm. So consider putting kids stuff on the guest network and essential things on the main network. I think Wi-Fi extenders just help you improve the connectivity in your house. Maybe some of you are using that. Maybe some of you are already doing something more complicated, like a mesh network. I won't get into what that is tonight. But if anyone has recommendations on how to improve Wi-Fi in your house, go ahead and put it in the chat. And finally, if everybody's trying to be online at the same time, it's a good idea. Just say in the morning, I have to do this with my family all the time. Say, hey, I need to be on without any interruptions on the network at this time. So can you please do your thing later on? Can we figure out how to work around each other? On security, I'll just go through this really quickly. Every device in your house that connects to the internet should have security software. Every device, including phones. Very briefly, I will say Trend is a security company. That's who I work for, but I work for the philanthropic division of Trend. Trend has software for mobile phones and laptops, but there's many other great ones out there. So just go to cnet.com and look up the top 10 security options for cell phones, laptops, and so on. Many of you already have it on your work devices, but you may not know that some of them also apply to your phones, meaning the same product could be used on the laptop and on a phone. Within those security software packages, there is a firewall as well option. So make sure that is turned on, because that gives you an added level of protection. I think it's probably obvious to use strong passwords, but I'll show you an example of how you could work with your kids on developing good password skills. Multi-factor authentication. What is this? Two-factor verification, it's called sometimes. This is another level of password, basically. And most of your favorite apps have this feature. Facebook has it, Instagram has it, TikTok has it, Gmail has it. So if you don't have this turned on, you absolutely should. And the reason is, if you ever find out that your password has been compromised or someone hacked it or knows it, then the only way to get into those accounts is to have a secondary piece of information. So very often you'll log into Facebook, but then it's going to text you a code. And that second step, or that multi-factor, is what it needs to unlock. So if you ever lost your password, it's okay, because they won't have your phone to be able to receive the text message with the code. So turn on multi-factor wherever you can. Oh, by the way, Roblox has this too. So please make sure, take a look at the features in the apps you and your kids use and turn it on. Finally, virtual private networks. It's a good idea to use one anytime you're connecting somewhere other than your own home, because it makes sure that your information traveling from your device to a website, let's say it's Amazon, that the traveling is protected. Okay, you can find great virtual private network options if you, again, go to cnet.com and search for the top ones. There are many, many options out there. In terms of good habits, And we've seen more of this during the pandemic because so many more people are using apps and screen time, but you've got to update everything, update as often as you can. Make sure your kids, if they have their own devices, that all of those software updates are happening. Why? Many times the updates are just to improve the user experience, but what we've seen over the last year is they're also plugging security holes. So make sure you look at it every night and just update it. You could set it to automatic update, but I noticed that it drains your battery. So if you're going to do that, make sure it's plugged in because updating can really drain your battery. On passwords, one of the exercises you could do with your kids to teach them good password habits is the longer the password, actually, the stronger it is. Yes, special characters make it stronger too, but the longer it is, the stronger it is. So a lot of times you cannot make a password that's billions of letters long. Instead, think about a sentence, maybe a sentence that makes them laugh or you laugh, that you will remember, and only use the first letter of each word in the sentence as your password. It's a good habit. Start working with your kids, especially if they're younger, and say, hey, let's make the password this time. And then maybe a month later, you choose to change it. So do change them often. And backup, finally. If you are, Google gives you free space, Apple gives you some free space, and then you have to pay after that. So that's fine if you want to use a backup option in the cloud. If you can swing it, I would also recommend one of those drives, hard drives, to actually do backup as well. If you can do both, that's a really good idea, because if one gets hacked or lost, you have the other one as well. Okay, and let's see. In terms of using tech tools, these are the things that are already available to you. These tools can help you filter a content so that's not okay for your kid's age, limit in-app purchases if it's a game that constantly wants them to buy new things to keep on playing. It can help you manage how much time they're spending on the internet in general or on a specific app, and help you even see what they're doing online. So they can already be inside your router, in the devices you own. Your service provider might offer them, but in that case, they might charge you extra. They already exist in security software. They're called parental controls. App stores have ways of filtering the kinds of apps your kids could download. And the sites and apps themselves have gotten much better over the last 5 years. Much better. And I'm going to show you a few in a minute. These tools don't even require you to spend any more money than you already have. And they're getting better. So here's one example. Anybody out there use iOS screen time? You know, the the thing that reminds you, if you have an Apple phone, every Sunday how much time you're spending on the phone. The thing about screen time is that you can actually set up your family in it too, and you can see everything they've been doing. Okay, so how does it work? You would go to settings, and there's an actual tab called screen time. And you would need to add your children as members of your Apple account. And you can see here on this example, this is my phone, my 2 kids. And when you click on one of them, you can see how much time they've been spending in general, even how many times they pick up the phone. You can see what kinds of apps they're spending most of their time on, whether it's watching videos or social media or gaming or email or whatever. And you can set restrictions such as what kinds of content they're allowed to download. You can even decide, whether or not they can change certain privacy settings of who they can connect with or not. The best one that parents use a lot for this is they will say you can only use Roblox for this much time. And when the time is up, it actually stops them from using it. What always happens after that is the child comes knocking on your door or tagging on your shirt and saying, may I please have X amount more time because I'm not quite done with this game. Has that ever happened to anybody? And oops, sorry about that. And so I highly recommend that if you're not already using, if you are an Apple family and you haven't used screen time, please consider using it. It can be very, very helpful, but mostly because the kinds of dialogue that it creates between you and your child is a good thing. They might have a good reason of why they need more time, and that's fine. But anything that encourages conversation between parent and child is a great thing. Another tool, anybody use TikTok? Anybody's kids big on TikTok out there? Put it in the chat. Anybody saying absolutely no to TikTok right now? Okay, I see some yeses and nos and not yet. Well, let me tell you, I will say of all the social media apps, TikTok has learned from its predecessors. And I have to say, they've done a really good job with this one feature called family pairing. This is a way for you, if you're not ready, or you think your child is not yet ready, to ease into TikTok, okay? And here's how it works. It's under settings called digital well-being. And under there, you will see, you will see a setting called family pairing. And what you have to do is you've got to download TikTok on both your own device and then the device that your child is using. But one of them will be designated yours, the parent, and the other as the child's. And once you have done that, then you as a parent are able to limit how much time they're actually allowed to use it, even the kind of content they will see on it, and finally, who can actually connect with them. You know, whether you limit it just to people you know or complete strangers, that would be up to you. And I have tested this and will say the kinds of content that you see when you have this turned on is pretty harmless. A lot of animals, some senior citizens who like to dance. You know, I see pretty harmless, fun stuff. So consider family pairing if you one day you say, yes, okay, maybe I'll let you now, but first we will do it this way. Finally, any Roblox families out there? Any kids who are playing a lot of Roblox? Yeah, I see a lot of yeses here. So Roblox actually also has done a really great job. And this is a video that comes from their own website, which shows you how you can set up lots of different security and privacy settings. You first have to set up a code in there. Only you know it, because once it's on, you can set settings that your child cannot undo. And it's everything from who can contact them and who they can chat with and so on. Now, Roblox has told me last week that they're very actively watching the chat in Roblox. In fact, if someone puts their home address in the chat or a phone number in the chat, it gets blocked, because they're constantly watching for situations that might be putting kids in unsafe situations, basically. So I think it's great. I think it's hard for them probably to keep up with that forever, but just know that Roblox, I think, tries to do a pretty good job of this. And do not be fooled. It isn't just younger kids on Roblox. There's quite a few people, older teens actually, that are really big fans of Roblox. And maybe there's some adults out there too, some of you. Okay. Setting the rules really just is comprised of 5 things. You know, first you decide what they're allowed to use. What are they allowed to use? If you're not sure, if they come to you, and this happened to me early last year when my son said, hey, Mom, can I download Among Us? I know there are fans out there. Let me know if you're big fans of Among Us in your house, at your school. And I, at the time, didn't really know what it was. And so I did a little research and noticed that there weren't a lot of reviews about it. So if your child ever asks you about an app, do a little homework and see if it's been reviewed a lot or not. At that time, it wasn't. It has been now. But at that time, I was a little bit sus, as they say. And the other resource I'm a big fan of is Common Sense Media. So maybe anybody ever hear of it? If you're not sure if an app or a game or a website, and they're actually great with movies and television shows as well, they'll give you a third-party review about these pieces of media and whether or not, even if it says PG-13 or age 12, it gives you just another piece of information to say, I still don't know if it's okay for my child. So that's Common Sense Media. You also get to decide, you need to set rules around when they're allowed to use the screen time and for how long. And I'm going to show you an exercise in a minute called the 24-hour exercise of how to help manage screen time in your house. Fourth rule is where they're allowed to use it. Now, during the pandemic, maybe the only place was home, but before and once we're over this, they may be out there on the bus, at a friend's house, who knows where they may be with their own device, or maybe they're at a friend's house who has an Xbox. And but you can decide, or you should talk to them about where they can be using these devices. Many parents over the years have asked me, how old should my child be before they get a phone? And I know they so desperately want me to tell them an age so they can go back to their kids and say, well, it looks like you don't get one until you're X old. I can't tell you that. That is up to you as a family and what your needs are. I will say, though, that if you don't need to get the smartphone right off the bat. It's very expensive, and I doubt that any of us had owned something that expensive when we were their age. But there are options like the Go phones, which are prepaid through AT&T. You only get so many, you pay only so much ahead of time, and your child starts to think, oh, well, if I use it too much, the money starts ticking down. So they start to think about budgeting their time on it. So that's a good way to kind of ease in. But once you give them that device, you can tell them, well, you can use it on the bus and you can use it, when I need to reach you, but you don't really need it at a sleepover because I know how to reach you at a sleepover, for example. Finally, with whom are they allowed to use it? It seems that everything our kids can do online these days are all social. Games are social. Obviously, social media is social. Even the apps they're using for school are social, meaning they can connect and communicate with other people, some of whom they know, and sometimes some of whom they don't. So it's your decision with whom they're allowed to use the technology. Having said this, it's a great idea to walk through these rules and have your child be a part of the process. Have them decide, weigh in on the rules about what, when, how long, where, and with whom. And have them also weigh in on what the consequences will be if they break those rules. They're more apt to abide by the rules they set themselves. Not always, but certainly if they have siblings, they will hold each other, as you know, accountable. Now, I want to talk about, I mentioned the 24 hours rules. A lot of people have come to me saying, I'm really struggling with the screen time thing. And, we're a year into this pandemic, but I will say, don't feel bad. If you made the choice to keep your child home, your community, and them safe in exchange for more screen time, that is okay. That is okay. Now, maybe you're a little worried because it's a little too much time, but let me use this exercise with you as a way to frame screen time, not just for you, but also a way you can talk about it with your children. And again, this comes from the Center on Media and Child Health in Boston. And by the way, hello, I'm dialing in from Boston, by the way. So think about a day has 24 hours, okay? And when you sit down with your child, they can write this down, or you can write it down for them, or they can just discuss it with you. But in that 24 hours, Have a conversation. How much of those 24 hours did you spend doing things that were good for your physical health? How many hours did you sleep? Have meals or help prepare meals? Exercise, play outside, ride your bike, go for a walk? How many hours? On top of that, how many hours have you spent doing things that support you as a learner? Being in school, doing homework, reading, maybe working on a hobby like an instrument or another skill like art or something else that supports you as a learner. On top of that, how many hours in that day, have you spent to support the relationships that are important in your life? Whether that's with you as your own family living under your roof, or even with other people, in a socially distanced manner, hopefully. It could be online, it could be off, but what time were you spending to support those relationships in your life? Now you add all of this up, and what is left is potentially time that could be used for screens. Doesn't have to be, but it could be. So what we recommend is for that time left over, you could create a menu, or some parents actually write ideas. The child could write it too on little slips of paper, fold them up, put them in a box and say, here's what I'm going to do with my leftover time today. Some of those options could be screen time. It could be Roblox. It could be Among Us. It could be Fortnite or TikTok. Or it could be, playing outside or, drawing something, doing something else in the house. But that is a way to help your child realize that, number one, there's only 24 hours in a day. And number two, there are all these things that are really important that should be happening every day before we consider screen time for fun. Now, if you do the math and the time left over is 6 hours, this does not mean that they should spend 6 hours on screens. And that is why having other options in the menu or activity box is a good idea. And, I think it's something to think about. I just wanted to give you, I think it's a great framework to help you as a parent think about screen time in the context of a day, but also help your children start to think about prioritizing and also what's really important, because there's only so many hours in a day. Okay. And finally, in this being online, we want to set a good example. So what rules do you have for yourself? How do you know if you work from home? How do you separate work from the time you now need to go and be with your family? Do you have rules? You can put them in the chat. How do you set a good example with technology and your children? Does anybody out there use their phone as their alarm clock? And if not, do some of you actually charge your phone somewhere else in the house before you go to bed? Guilty, because I use it as a clock. I shouldn't. I should really charge it in another room, just like I have my kids do. Thankfully, they don't challenge me on this, but I do feel like a hypocrite sometimes on this. And finally, how do you encourage time together, whether it's online or off? These are things we should think about in terms of setting the example, because we all know it's very difficult to ask your children to do something. They can smell hypocrisy fairly easily, especially with their own parents. Okay, so I'm going to pause now for some questions here. And again, you can enter the questions in any language you like, and we'll try to get to it. So I'm going to go ahead and try and answer a few of these now. So thank you for submitting them. I've heard from other parents, there are apps that our children put on their phones to look like calculators or things that look like that, and they're trying to mask what they're really looking at and doing. That's true. There are apps out there that help them do that. One of the things though, that's why I'm a big fan of screen time, because it's really going to tell you what they're really doing on the phone. I think it's a very empowering tool, to be honest with you. And what is the best app for monitoring your child's device? So yeah, I think it isn't even an app. I would highly recommend using iOS screen time if you are an Apple family. If you're not an Apple family, there are some options out there, but here's what I would say about them. They're costly. They only are useful up to a certain degree. And when your child is not necessarily, I know Disney Circle has an option that is router based and can even monitor things when your kids are away from the home. The thing I worry about with devices like that are A, they can be costly, and B, it doesn't help you with everything, right? It doesn't help you with everything. It doesn't replace your need to be communicating often, really checking in with them. And, you're welcome to use those kinds of things, but you don't need to spend that kind of money. There are other ways that you can be more involved in knowing what's going on in their lives, in their online time. And it's mostly through communication. So start early and do it often. Question, are we recording the webinar today? We are actually recording the webinar today. And we will make it available on demand, actually. So I'll give you my contact information so you'll know how to get that afterwards. All right. Is there a restriction in place for school iPads so kids don't access unauthorized sites? For example, the Seesaw app for kids school allowed for teachers to add a link to YouTube so they can watch an activity. However, because they're on YouTube instead of the YouTube app, I don't see ways of restricting access. How do I control this? This is a sticky one, especially during the pandemic. I think having conversations with the teachers and the schools and knowing in advance what kinds of apps or sites that they are going to be requiring or giving or asking your children to access, that communication between you and the school is something I highly recommend. And this goes into even the new school year coming, because I think there will be even more new ways that technology will continue to be used in the classroom. And many times those apps and sites have not really been vetted as well as I think they should be. And I personally had a situation where my child was told by the teacher to go to this website. What the teacher did not know was the kinds of advertising that were showing up on this free website. Then the ads were coming from a free, a separate server that didn't really care who was coming to the site. And those ads were not okay for a child to be seeing, or it was too easy for them to click and go out to accidentally go to another site that could be really inappropriate. So that is the only way you can really control it. There is not, especially if it's a school-owned device, there's not a lot you can do other than make it known to the school that you have concerns about some of the sites being recommended. Would your kids need their own Apple accounts to use iOS screen time, or is it by device? So yeah, you would set up your child as a user under, they would be an Apple user under your iOS account. And then, but you designate them as a family member, and that way you can do a lot of viewing, monitoring, and even restricting. All right, I'm going to move ahead and we'll get to the rest of the questions later, but keep them coming. It's great. I want to talk a little bit about being safe. So privacy. Well, it's a complicated one. It seems that everybody has their own definition of privacy. Some people are really willing to share quite a lot about what's going on in their lives, and some people are not. So I think the first thing about privacy when you talk to your children is understanding that different people have different definitions, and be clear about what your family's values are around privacy, but respect what other people's values are around privacy. Now, when it comes to people you don't know, very obvious, use privacy settings. Use the strictest level that you can to protect you, but also that still allows you to use the app or the game in the way that you want. And these are just examples of, this is Fortnite, and they don't have privacy on by default. Most apps and games do not have privacy on the way that you want it right out of the box. As soon as you sign up, you got to get in there and turn it on. I wish it was the other way around. It is not the case. But one thing I could recommend with your kids, when they ask you for a new game or a new app, make it something you do together. Say, okay, I'm going to let you use this, but let's see. Okay, tell me what you find. Where are the privacy settings? What does it say? How does it work? And have them explain that to you and be a part of the process together. So they become conscientious about the importance of privacy and whether or not that app is even protecting them in any way. Okay. And, the thing about privacy is that privacy settings is that protects us from the people we don't know, let's say, people we don't really maybe want our kids connecting with right now. There's another side to privacy, though, and that is, and I'm just using Instagram as an example here. This is all that legal language you see when you download an app for the first time and you don't really read it. You just scroll all the way to the bottom and you hit I accept or I agree. But what is in the language on almost every app that's free, especially social networking apps, but almost every app that is free, is a phrase, and it's not written in these words. The phrase basically means that you own everything you do or post or whatever on that app. But you give the company who make the app, you give them the right to use it whenever, wherever, forever. And I can tell you when I've had these conversations with students, makes them pretty mad, actually. They don't realize that that's the rights they're giving up. But that's the cost of free. We don't pay to use these apps with money. We pay with something else, and that is our personal information. So the second thing about privacy is that there is none. There is a way to protect yourself from the strangers, but there's no privacy between you and the company who made the game or the app you're using. And that is why it is so important that we consider how we act and how we behave and who we connect with. And because it's being collected constantly. Things that we do are being collected and used about us. And those companies are storing them somewhere and hopefully they're safe, but who knows? And that is the reason why nothing is really private on the internet. So that's an important message you can share with your children about privacy. It's not just about strangers. It's about all the data that we've become to these companies. On protecting information, these are cyber criminals. These are hackers, right? They want your money. They want to steal credit card information. They want to steal social security numbers, addresses, email addresses, passwords. They're not necessarily targeting your kids, but they go where the people go. And if your children spend any time on the internet, then they could consequently become a victim of cybercrime. They'll see it in search results. They'll see it in, pop-up ads. They'll see, very suspicious text messages saying you could win something if only you click here or tap here. So the way to protect yourself and your family from this, especially younger kids who might accidentally, tap on something and didn't mean to, just use the security software on those devices, as we said before. That will mostly stop them from going anywhere or downloading anything that they didn't mean to be downloaded. But encourage their instinct, because having, again, worked with a lot of children on this topic, when I've asked them if they've ever seen anything suspicious online, many of the hands go up pretty fast. And they're very eager to share with you, one time this pop-up, one time I saw this ad, one time I got this email. And I asked them, well, what did you do? And they usually say, I X'd out of it, because X is a verb now, apparently. And so there's something already in their instincts telling them. So just encourage that with your kids. Now, if they accidentally click on something or they feel they did something wrong, make sure they know they can come to you for help. Because what you don't want to happen is that they did that and then they don't tell you, and therefore you don't know if they downloaded something like a spyware or keylogger, and it's just sitting there waiting for you to go to a banking website, and it waits for you to enter that password, and it's just collecting it and sending it back to some command center. So make sure that if they feel that they've clicked on something wrong, that they do communicate and feel like they can come to you about that. But use security software. It'll largely protect you. Okay, I'm going to go to one more poll here. Do any of your kids have their own phone right now? Yes, no, not yet, but soon, or not for a few more years. So yes, no, not yet, but soon, not for a few more years. Now, I know many of you said your children were between 10 and 14, so it sounds like we have a lot of tweens that have phones here. Okay. There's a lot of you, half of you who answered have phones here. All right. So I want to just say a few things about the phone. And specifically, the one thing about the phone that every kid wants it for, and that's the camera. Right? I mean, they use it for other things. They text their friends, they look at YouTube, they listen to music, right? But that camera, the camera is so powerful. Here's the thing about the camera. When you get the phone, when you take a photo, even if it's just a selfie with only you in it, or maybe it's a photo of a family pet, there is far more in the picture than what you see in the picture. Every photo you ever take is accompanied by metadata, lots of data. The type of phone it is, the type of camera on the phone it is, your location of where you took the picture. And if you then upload that picture onto Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, that information goes along with it. And if someone wanted to, they could easily copy the photo, put it on anything on a search engine. You can easily find out the latitude and longitude of where the photo was taken. So if your children's devices don't already have it turned off, turn off location services for the camera. You can keep it on for Google Maps or other kinds of apps that need location in order to work. But, you know, there's some people who want to know where they took the pictures, and that's great if that's how you want to use your camera and you want to keep location services on, great. Most parents I've talked to over the years have said, how do I turn that thing off? So if you can do this on Android phones and you can do this on iPhones as well. You go to location services and you turn it off for the camera. You can decide which apps have it on or off. Does Angry Birds need it? No, but it's up to you if you want to keep it on or off. There's another thing about the camera that I cannot stress enough. We do work closely with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and we do know that over the course of this pandemic, there was a rise in reporting to them about images of young people that are images they would not want getting out to the whole world to see. And I think if there are any young people listening, and I don't know if they're out there tonight, sometimes they are, I will say this: you should never feel pressured to take one of those pictures. And we do also work with an organization named Thorn who surveyed young people, and it was amazing, them telling Thorn the age they were, that the first time they were asked for one of those kinds of photos, how young they were when they were asked by someone online for a photo like that. It's very, very important that we tell our children to not feel that pressure to take it, to not take it as a way of, I want to show this person I like them, so I'm going to send them one of these pictures. Because it really is forever. And again, even if you take the photo, but you never send it, as soon as you've taken it and it's sitting there on the phone, especially if you back up your photos to something like iCloud, well, it's already out there. That's another copy going out there that who knows what could happen to it in that travel. I was also asked a question maybe 7 years ago by a father who said, my kid has a phone, but it's under my name. I pay for the phone bill. I bought him the phone, and he's a really good kid. But what happens if somebody sends him a picture like that? I mean, what am I supposed to do? What is he supposed to do? And I shared that question with you because I thought it always struck me, and I want to share it with you. The advice is this: if your child ever does receive one like that, number one, again, this is why lines of communication being open are so important. Make sure they come to you immediately. And the second thing is delete it, because the act of carrying it around is considered a felony. The creation of, the possession of, and the distribution of an image of an underage person in that kind of situation is technically a felony. It doesn't mean they're going to punish a child in the way that they would an adult who had that kind of material. But you don't want to be walking around with it. You don't want to be sending it on to other people. And if you as a parent feel comfortable enough to approach the parent of the other child, if you happen to know them, and just say, I just want you to know this happened, that's an action you can take. If you don't feel comfortable about that, maybe report it to the school, but take an action. And the reason is this: if the picture actually got sent to more than one person and there has to be and there is an investigation, they're already going to know. They're going to know that the photo was sent and who received it. They're going to know. So don't walk around with it anyway, and take action if it happens. Finally, on protecting yourself in gaming, we already talked about the fact that gaming is very social. So, I'm a big fan of games that have limited chat options. So if you can find games where instead of free-form chat, especially for the young kids, that the chat is pre-canned, you only can select certain phrases. I believe I'm a big fan of Rocket League. Anybody's kids play Rocket League? You literally just drive a car around and try and hit a soccer ball into a net. Except I'm very terrible at it, but my son is pretty good at it. But you could be playing against people you don't know, but the nice thing is you can't just say whatever you want in those games. Fortnite's a little different. So if you limit them playing with just their friends, then it's okay because they are just talking with their friends. I'm also a big fan of games that have times. So this is like Madden football and Rocket League is another one. FIFA, soccer. Unfortunately, there are games that can go on and on and on and on forever. And so if you're one of those parents with a child who really struggles to stop the gaming, you could use the tools we talked about, like screen time. Xbox now has an app that's free called Xbox Family Settings, and you can actually do it from your phone. You can decide how long they can play on the Xbox. So check out that app. And finally, limiting who it is that they can be connecting with. So we already talked about some of these games. Some are better than others at restricting and giving you some control over who they can connect with. Okay, I'm going to take a couple more questions here. Would your kids need their own application? Oh, actually, we answered that one already. We stopped Roblox when strangers were getting into rooms where my kids were playing, and I thought I had all security settings on. Is this something we can change? I'm not sure. how to answer that question. I would say that you definitely can go in and change settings, as I showed you before. Go to security, set a code, then go back into privacy, and you have tons of options there. You can limit who they can be connecting with and so on. So take a look at that in Roblox settings for sure. And I also encourage you to join. I'll show you later. We're actually having Roblox join us for our webinar series coming up in another month or so. So bring your questions, so then you can throw all kinds of questions at Roblox at that time too. Do I need Roblox on my own device to change these settings? No, you do not. You use your child's device that has it. You go into security, you set the code. Only you know the code, okay? And then you need the code to go in and change the privacy settings. So only you can change it if you set the code and you don't tell anybody that code. Okay, Roblox watching with algorithms or human eyes. I think it's a combination of both. I actually don't know the real answer to that, but I know they have they do have real live moderators as well watching, but they could actually be using some machine learning to recognize that there's certain information being shared. So, okay, I'm going to move on to being kind. And I will get to the rest of the questions too. So don't worry, don't worry. I think the first one is the easiest here, and that is what we told our kids, what we tell our kids since they're very, very young. You treat others with respect and kindness always. I actually like to use the phrase that it's like a superpower, because amazing things can happen if you use them, respect and kindness. So it's the right thing to do. We should treat each other this way because we want to be treated that way too. But as we talked about already, on the internet, nothing's ever really private anyway. So it's going to reflect on us. And the choices that we make online add up to a picture of who we are. But the other thing about kindness is not just about not saying mean things. It's not just about that. It's about other things too. We talked earlier about respecting privacy, and this is a source of a lot of drama that happens, especially in middle school, when they take a group photo and one person loves how they look in it, and they go ahead and they post it online, and the rest of the people in it are like, I look terrible, my hair looks terrible, I can't believe she or he posted that without asking me. So if you want to teach your kids to avoid the kind of drama that sometimes turns into nasty bullying cases, with their close friends, say, hey, are you okay if I post this? Are you okay? Has anyone ever had a family member or friend that posted something with you in it without you knowing, or without your permission, or that maybe made you feel uncomfortable? Maybe someone you're related to did that. It sounds like some of you have had that experience. I have, and it's not a comfortable conversation, but you have every right to protect your family's privacy. And if you need to ask them to take it down, say, we're not comfortable with that. Can you please, do you mind taking it down? Or do you mind asking us first if it's okay? And we had to kind of do that with some family members. It wasn't comfortable in the beginning, but now they ask every time, are you okay with this? And sometimes we say yes, and sometimes we say no. Let's all do that for each other. Rules and values. This used to happen when I was younger around makeup and getting your ears pierced, and being allowed to sleep over someone's house, or walk home by myself, or watch a rated R movie. We all had different rules as families of how old was okay. So you know what? Your children are going to have classmates who don't have their phones yet, who might not even get one until they're 13. Who might not be allowed on TikTok till they're 14, and that's okay. Let's make sure that we teach our children every family has their own values and their own rules, and we're not going to make them feel bad about it. And if they don't have text as a way to communicate, find a way to include that. I coached a soccer team of girls who were in 7th and 8th grade a few years back, and some had phones and some did not. So we always said, make sure you also email it as well as text it to each other, whatever it is. The last one is, and I've had some parents tell me about the time that people are allowed to use their devices. So some families say you're allowed to have a phone, but at this hour, you're done. Where other families, the kid's still allowed to be on it for a while. So I remember this mother saying to me, my daughter was really distraught because she texted her friend and she said, Mom, I don't know why she didn't respond. I think she's really mad at me. I don't know what I did. And she was done using the phone for the day. She wasn't mad at her friend, but her friend, the woman's daughter, was just so distraught all night thinking that she had really angered her friend, when in fact, her friend just had different rules about when she could be on the phone and not on the phone. So we got to talk to our kids about the fact that not everybody has the same relationships and rules around technology. Finally, on kindness, it's just really important that we tell our children, and social media has not made this easier at all, that they are not equal to the number of likes, comments, connections, friends, or followers that they have online. They're equal to so much more than that. We've got to constantly remind them of this because social media makes it too easy to feel like everybody else's life is so much better than your own. But let's remind our children that social media is media and it can be manipulated. It can be scrubbed to present this image that maybe isn't real. And we just got to keep on encouraging our kids about the things they can control, the things they're good at, and not get so caught up in the value that they put on social media. So you as parents, be supportive. We do know that research definitely shows that children who get in trouble online, who get caught up in situations that are challenging and maybe hurtful, the ones who bounce back the best are the ones who have great supports around them, meaning good friends who build them up, you as parents holding them up and helping them get through it. Also be prepared. And you don't need to answer this now, but think about these two questions, and hopefully you will never, ever have to go back to them again. But these two questions are, what would you do if your child was ever bullied online? And I'm sorry if some of you have already had this situation with your children. I am very sorry. Hopefully it was handled okay. But what would you do? That's question number one, if your child was bullied. And the second question is, what would you do if it was your child who was unkind to someone else online? Again, hopefully you'll never have to know or use whatever your answers are to those questions. But think about them and be prepared if you ever do. And know that, and make sure that you understand what the school's rules are around it, that you talk about it with other parents. Hey, if you ever see my kid doing this, you promise you'll tell me, right? Make sure you've got friends like that who have your back too. And finally, show them what kindness looks like online. You know, the stories you see on Facebook, the ones that you finally say, look at that. I have faith in humanity again. And share those stories of the things that you see people doing that are positive online. Show them what kindness looks like. All right, I'm going to take a couple more questions here. How do we handle technology safeguards at our children's school? I had an incident with child viewing inappropriate content during classroom time, and the school pushed digital citizenship as the fix rather than checking their protections on the devices. It's a really good question. So if the devices, if they're in the school, there should be a way via the network. And usually this is through settings that the IT department would put in place that would not allow them. It's called, you could blacklist, you could block certain websites. Like, you probably don't want YouTube for everybody, but you could make exceptions for certain periods of time. And IT would let people in and out of those websites as needed by the classroom. Now, if the device or the network, if this is happening at home, this is a little more difficult. And this is where you as parents can use some of those tools we talked about. Security software has parental controls. You can limit the kinds of websites your children can go to on your own devices. You can block all sites that are adult content, violent, gambling, and so on. All of those capabilities are already inside your security software. So I don't know if I've answered that, but if it's happening in the school, that's something that needs to be brought up to the school, and the school needs, the IT department should have ways of limiting the types of websites that children are able to access in the classroom. What if most of their school day is spent on screens, though? How do you balance learning and fun time? That's a great question. Give their eyes a rest for sure. When they get home, maybe encourage activity that doesn't involve screens at all. And then I think later on in the day, you can allow a little bit of time for fun. You know, if the time for fun also is it's not just fun, but it's even inclusive of like a learning experience too, I think that's fine. I think that's a great combination. But do the things we talked about, you know, make sure their poor little eyes are getting rest. And then don't let it go on for hours and hours of the day. You know, I know this is difficult, especially now, because they're using screens for school as well. But you know, but allow those moments for fun now and again. And if some days you need to keep it to 30 minutes and other days you allow a little bit more, that's up to you. But have them understand, you know, the amount of time they're spending doing different things in 24 hours. Thank you for offering us grace if we've allowed excess screen time over the last year. You're very welcome, but no need to thank me. No one has a rule book for a pandemic plus internet. I'm fairly sure there was no time in history where that was the case. But how do you suggest slowly cutting back? It truly has become, you know, I think finding other ways to have them spend their time is probably the best way. And it could be, you know, again, some kind of outside activity. Now, I will say there's an interesting app, and it escapes me now. I gave it as a gift to someone. It actually was a scavenger hunt game. So you got the list in an app or in an email of things they had to find, but then they had to basically run around your yard and find the things on that list in as quick a time as they could. And they were competing with other people to see how fast they could find it all. So I think those are other ways to say, well, it's an app or it's a website that's giving me the list, but the activity I'm actually doing is outside. I've heard people doing instrument lessons over Zoom as groups. I know somebody whose child was doing steel drum lessons with other people on. So that's a combination of they're doing something physically, but it's using screens, if you will. But there's some options out there, you know, it hopefully not too much longer. And especially if the weather's getting nicer, they'll be able to get outside more, for sure. Best Android equivalent for iOS screen time. So actually, I failed to mention Google also released their own family app that allows you to do a lot of this management of things through Android devices. So I apologize, the name of the app escapes me, but it is by Google. I believe it's called Google Family Settings or something like that. But I'll be happy if you want to follow up with me afterwards. I'll give you my contact information to give you the answer. All right, I'm going to move to we're on the final stretch here, and this isn't very long, so we are almost there, everyone. Being savvy, as we said, is about encouraging good habits and good uses. So, oh, thank you for the person who put that in the chat. It's Family Link by Google. Family Link by Google is the free app by Google that can help you with a lot of family settings on Android devices. And with Google services too, by the way, so Gmail and so on. Okay, good habits. So I have a question for you. Have you ever looked up your own name online? Have you ever looked up your own name online? Yes. Go ahead and share in the chat what, yes, I apparently died. Oh gosh, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, you should look up who you are online. You need to know that you have a cyber twin or cyber twins. I am apparently someone you could write in jail. I also own a like a hotel or event planning business in San Diego. There's a lot of me out there. There's probably a lot of you out there. It's a good idea to do. When I've asked children this question, they do it. They've done it. Ask your own kids if they've done it and what they have found. And you know what? They don't just find their twins. They actually find sometimes something about them. And in one case, I remember this young man saying, he must have been third or fourth grade, telling me that it was because he had participated in something in school, so it was in the local paper. But another young woman who was older, she was actually a senior in high school already, who found a very unflattering photo of herself that was taken by a classmate from a video, and he took the still from it and posted it. And she was in the process of applying to colleges, and so when she found that, she went, thankfully knew who he was, and said, take it down right now. She reported it to the service. They took it down. Hopefully that didn't impede her wishes and hopes for her future. But it's a good idea to do that because you never know what other people might be posting about you. And so there's a way to do this that makes it easier for you so you don't have to keep searching every time, okay? Google has something called alerts. So you go to google.com alerts, and you can put in any phrase or name. You could use this for work, by the way. On a topic you care about, you could put your child's name. And you decide how often you want to get an alert. It will send you an email once a day, once a week, and so on. Go to google.com alerts. Okay. There's another reason why I think this is a good habit, which we'll talk about in a minute. Another thing about good habits is, how do we teach our kids to question what's real or what's not, what's truth and what's not online? Well, that's a loaded question, right? That's a big one to tackle. But there are some easy ones when it comes to, maybe there's a person who's trying to friend them that's not really who they say they are. They call catfished, fake account. It's not really who they say they are. It's too easy for someone to take a photo of someone else and to create an account pretending to be that person. So one of the things that kids already are very savvy about that they can do, and some of them know this and some of them don't, is you take the profile photo of somebody and you do a reverse image search. And you will see if that image has been used in other places already that have nothing to do with the person who's pretending to be that photo. The thing about information and what we can trust or not, I will just say that it's a great idea to teach our kids habits of, don't quickly believe, don't quickly share, don't quickly react to everything you're seeing out there. Take a moment to pause and ask questions. Why was this photo or this video or this piece of information made? Who made it? What could be missing from it? And how might different people view it? How do I know it's really true? Have I actually looked at another source to back it up? Who's benefiting from it and who's being hurt by it? And I would just say, this is a skill called media literacy skills, which teachers have been pushing for a long time. We have our own guide that we recommend called A Parent's Guide to Media Literacy, of situations where, when your child might say, hey, I saw this thing on Instagram. Like, I heard that this was happening to the vaccine. And you should sit immediately and say, where did you hear that? How do you know that? And these are good conversations to have with our kids because they really do rely on social media for news. They don't watch the news like we do. That's not where they're getting their information. So, asking them how they're seeing the world, where are they getting their information? Great sources of conversation, sure, for the dinner table. I want to touch back then to this idea of the things we're doing online and why we want to search for ourselves around this number here. We've been watching the Kaplan Institute for 7 years now. I think they've been doing a study. And maybe some of your kids are too young for this now, but maybe one day they'll be interested in applying to college or university or a job. And they've been asking for many years, the college admissions officers, do you look kids up online beyond the application that they sent in? And when they first did the study, it was 25% said yes, then 30, then 35, then 40. And then they changed the question to say, do you feel you have every right to look the student up online if you had to? If you kind of weren't sure, are they a good possibility for our school? So in the most recent survey, which was just released this January, 65% of them said they absolutely would if they just weren't sure about the student. Now, 58% of them said that when they did it, they unfortunately found something that they didn't really like about the student. And that is why it is important to talk to them about everything we just said, why you want to use privacy settings, why you want to behave in ways that you want reflected on you. Okay, but 42% said, you know, I wasn't sure about this candidate, but then I found this awesome thing about them. And this is why just telling our children what not to do with the internet is not enough, because it could really help them to understand how to build a digital footprint that is positively reflecting on them. And how do you do that? What if your child's only 9 or 10 years old right now? Well, maybe you don't really need to worry about it right away, but there are things we can be doing now, and that is encouraging those good uses. So could they be using YouTube or Khan Academy or even TikTok to learn a new skill? Sure, that's a good positive use. But they can also do things like raise money for their scout troop, or maybe there's a food bank or some cause local and near and dear to your hearts that you could raise money for. There are more and more sites that allow you to showcase accomplishments. Honestly, if your child is a great writer, artist, even athlete or performer or musician, or there's just something they really like to do, make videos. There are sites out there now like Huddle for athletes, and even WordPress you can put behind a password. If they like to write, you don't have to show it to the whole world, but they can start learning how to use a blog or create a blog for all their writing and so on, or their artwork. And then, I've had parents ask me before, like, what if my kid really loves making videos, but they're not old enough to have their own YouTube channel yet. In fact, you have to be 13, by the way. What do I do? And I actually recommend direct that energy to contests. There are great contests out there for videos, for writing, poetry, photography, artwork. Direct some of that energy, even if they don't win. What a great experience to learn how to work within a timeline, to follow rules, to compete. And even if you don't win, they can start to build up a repertoire of contests that they've entered. And maybe they'll become a runner-up. Maybe they will win. That would be great too. But it's a really nice experience as well. And that was my way of also, I'd really love to plug this with you. We're actually running our annual video contest right now. It ends April 20th. Any kids or teachers with their students can participate. The grand prize is $10,000 for a student who enters, that would be split between them and their school. So they could win their school $5,000 and win $5,000 of their own. Go to whatsyourstory.tremicro.com. They have until April 20th. So if any of your kids, if they're under 13, then you'll have to register for them, but they could still compete. If they're over 13 and under 17, they just need, or under 18, they would just need you to give permission. And but any students can compete in this. So I encourage you to keep active in this area. This is not a session you come to and then you're done. It's not. It's something you need to stay constantly communicating with others on, your school, each other in the same community, and with your children. And keep learning. And I'll show you some resources of how you can do that. The first is through our co-partner who brought tonight's event to you, PTO Today. This is their resource of lots of great things, like a contract that you can write with your kids to agree on rules, some FAQs, other things, sort of terminology that kids use in text and so on. And these are our resources at internetsafety.trendmicro.com. But I also welcome you to join our every other Wednesday webinar series about a range of topics. We have fantastic experts joining us. Tomorrow, I'm actually hosting someone to talk about TikTok with me, and specifically the latest craze on TikTok challenges. Some of them are fine, and some of them are kind of dangerous, but please join us if you can. You go to internetsafety.trendmicro.com and you will see it under webinars. And this was just sort of a quiz, but I'm not going to do the quiz. When you leave tonight, you'll see in front of you a feedback form. So I encourage you, I love any feedback that you have. It'll take you only 2 minutes to finish. Put your email address in there. If you want to win one of 5 copies of Trend Micro's Maximum Security, this will is good for a year, and it will cover 5 devices in your home. So phones, laptops, other kinds of devices. Feel free to, you don't have to give your email address if you don't. So I'm going to finish up answering these questions that are here, and feel free to continue adding. As kids get older and they want Instagram and Snapchat, do you have any advice and guidelines for appropriate use of these apps? Well, first, I encourage you to download them yourself and see what they're all about. You don't have to be an expert at them. You don't have to be someone who posts on them all the time. But as soon as you download it, you're first going to be faced with, should I turn on this privacy setting or that privacy setting? And you'll also start to see the kinds of content that is coming up in on those apps. I think the things we talked about tonight, explain to your children that even though these apps are free, they're not really free. And even if they use privacy settings to protect them from strangers, there is no privacy between them and the company who made the app. And finally, they should treat others on there the way that they want to be treated. And they should not feel pressured to do things or post things that are, either going to be hurtful for themselves or somebody else. You can have fun with these apps, just following others. A lot of people are big fans of movie stars and musicians and sports figures and other people, so they could use it just to follow those kinds of people, but they also can use it to communicate with their friends. We have a lot of other tips and resources on our website as well. Okay, Gigi, I'm going to ask you to, you know what? I can actually read this. Me gustaría recibir una copia de toda esta información, por favor. You would like a copy of this information? Yes, I will be making a copy available through the recording, and you can also go to the website. So please email me, Alma, at the email address that I'm going to show you. I hope I didn't butcher that, by the way. That's a couple years of Spanish in high school. Could we have all this information summarized in written form? So I am happy to make some of this information available, but a lot of it is on internetsafety.trendmicro.com, and you can go to it based on, is it around bullying? Is it around gaming? Is it around social media, video chat apps, and so on? So you can find a lot of our tips that I shared with you tonight on that website, internetsafety.trendmicro.com. Oh, shoot. I accidentally removed one. Are they available in other languages? Actually, yes. Are there any other languages friendly ways of accessing these settings? So our resources are available in 8 languages. So take a look at internetsafety.trendmicro.com and go under resources, and you will see that there's about 8 or 9 languages available for our resources. Do you know of any kid-safe versions of urbandictionary.com? Gosh, that's a good question. I do not, Melinda, but I want to find that answer for you. So I will take that down as a note to look up for you and communicate with you. And thank you for your email address, Alma. So I think with that, I finally just want to share with you my contact information. I want to thank you all so much. I always try to make sure I get through every single question because it's important to me that I answer them. So I know it went a little bit longer than probably you were expecting, but I do hope that tonight was helpful for you. I wish you all well as we get through the other side of this pandemic. Be safe, help your kids be safe online. And do the things that we talked about, and I think you'll be okay. The fact that you're here says a lot about you as parents. So if there's any other way that we can help, feel free to reach out to my contact information. I'm very active on Twitter too, so if any of you use it, feel free to follow me there. I try to keep people up on things that are going on. And but I'd love to say hi too if you ever if you do use Twitter. But my email address is there. For anybody who's interested in getting a copy of tonight's presentation of this recording, please email me at the address noted here. That link of the recording will be available, but for a limited time only. And the reason is that our next event will actually be on March 31st. That will be 7 p.m. Pacific time. And we have 2 sessions per month all the way through to the end of May, which you will find on our website. The information gets outdated pretty fast, and that is why we don't make the recordings available forever, because we're constantly updating as we get new information from the apps that we talk about, from the news, and from our research. With that, I would like to thank you all for joining. It was great. Just so you know, 17 schools from 13 states were on tonight. This was just fantastic. I hope you got a chance to connect with each other and feel like you're not alone. Good night, everyone. I'd also like to thank Gigi and Abdi and Muna for being fantastic interpreters for our session tonight as well. Thank you so much.